I just built a gaming PC during the RAM apocalypse. How did I do it? Now, one of the places that I cut was the total system RAM capacity. For a long time, getting 32 gigabytes of system RAM made sense because it didn't cost that much more than 16, and it made you a lot more future-proof. You don't have to worry as much about what you're running in the background. However, now that RAM prices have gone through the roof, if I'm looking at getting 16 gigabytes of system RAM, I'm spending about $180 for the lowest prices. It's kind of crazy. If I want 2x16 to get 32 total, now I'm shooting up to at least $260. So and that's for slower memory than what I was seeing on the 2x8 capacity. So with that in mind, I was like, is it actually that much worse to just go with 16? Now, Hardware Unboxed did some interesting testing on this recently. I'm going to link this video in the video description. And what they noticed is when comparing 8, 16, 32, and 64 of system memory, in the vast majority of cases, 16 is completely fine, whereas sometimes like having 8 gigabytes of system memory gets you some frame time spikes that you're not seeing on the 16, like here, for example. Now, that's not to say that they never ran into any issues using 16, specifically in Mafia: The Old Country. They got some frame time spikes that they didn't see on 32 gigabytes and we're seeing on the 8 and the 16 systems. Now, in their testing, though, in order to address some of the common criticism of this kind of testing, which is it's not real world, they were running other programs in the background. They had some Chrome tabs open, etc. So I think that in some of these edge cases, you could save a little bit more of that system RAM by not running the stuff in the background, and that's how I tend to game anyway. I like to zone like in complete attention on the game that I'm playing. I don't have other stuff going on a second monitor, anything like that, nothing going in the background. I understand that's not how everybody uses their PC, but that is how I use my PC. So anyway, I'm just saying that right now the plan is that this is kind of a bit of a placeholder for now. We can use the system memory at 16 gigabytes to save some money, and then in the future, when hopefully RAM prices come down, upgrade that to 32, or just save up some additional money if it's becoming a nuisance, and get the 32 gigabytes of RAM at some point. So this is one of the concessions that's being made on this system. Now, the other thing that's really important to keep in mind, if you're getting less system RAM, like 16 instead of 32, is there's another thing that works, like a PC is a system, the parts work together. And the video memory on your graphics card, the VRAM, also plays into this. I really love that in this video, Hardware Unboxed also looked at, what if you used a graphics card with only 8 gigabytes of VRAM and then looked at the 16 gigabyte system versus, talking about system memory versus 32 here on the right, and they did start to notice some more issues. Because if a game wants to go over 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but you only have 8 gigabytes of VRAM, then it has to reach into system memory and come across the PCIe bus, which already slows everything down, no matter how much system RAM you have. But if it also starts to mean system RAM gets overwhelmed, it causes additional problems. So I would say that if you're going with the lower amount of system memory, it's important to have enough VRAM. So I'm actually building a high-end PC here. The only real cut on the actual performance components is that 16 gigabytes of system memory. And I'm going to pair this with a 9070 XT GPU. I'm going to go with the Steel Legend. And this one is 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So that's one of the reasons why I'm choosing this card specifically, is that it has 16 gigabytes. The other reason I'm choosing it is, again, due to the RAM apocalypse. The price of high-end graphics cards has gone through the roof. The 5090, we don't even want to talk about, but that was never reasonable anyway, but we're like well over $3,000 right now. The 5080 has also shot back well over its MSRP to almost $1,300. And the 5070 Ti, don't be fooled by these $830 listings. They're not actually available. When I check PC Part Picker, it's available soon. If you click on the Amazon listing, it's not actually available. Same thing with this one. So most 5070 Ti's on the market are sold out below about $1,000, which means that if you're going to build a fairly high-end system, the 9070 XT is still hanging in here around $700. Now, this is still a very expensive choice to go with, but again, I'm building a fairly high-end PC here, and I should also give the disclaimer, for my build, I already own some parts because I'm a tech YouTuber. So I'm trying to choose parts that make sense, but I'm also drawn towards parts that, I already have. So I do have a 9070 XT Steel Legend, and I have another 9070 XT. I actually have the Monster Hunter Wilds edition. I was given both of them as review samples, and here I'm putting together a white PC. The Steel Legend fits in perfect with it, and I think that actually, like I said, the 9070 XT just makes sense right now if you're buying a high-end system, especially if you need 16 gigabytes of VRAM, because you're pairing it with a lower amount of system RAM to kind of balance out that pricing. So I think in the current market, these kinds of choices make sense. Now, also on the system RAM comment, if you're still like, really, you went with 16, there's another reason I did that. The reason I did that is because I took advantage of a bundle deal. So some of these components that I'm using in the system, I bought on Black Friday. Now, I probably should have given you guys like a flashbang warning or something like that, but this is some of the parts I purchased on Black Friday. Now, these were parts I actually highlighted on my channel. I like to highlight good deals on components. And I mentioned that RAM prices were going insane and probably going to get worse, which was completely correct. And I noticed that there was a motherboard deal, $160 for an Asus B850 Max Gaming Wi-Fi, which is a pretty solid motherboard, built-in Wi-Fi, which is convenient. And it came with 16 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 CL38, so not the absolute fastest, but in the current market, guys, makes some sense. And that was a free bundle with the motherboard. So sure, I could have bought a compatible motherboard for my CPU for a little bit less than this, but then you're scraping the bottom of the barrel on motherboards, and you don't get the RAM bundled with it. So this got me a really good deal on that RAM, and I couldn't find any good RAM bundle deals for 32 gigabytes. So that's another reason why I went with this. So again, buying when you find good bundle deals, those Black Friday deals that I highlighted were really good as well. Now this also explains some other parts that I got in my system. So I went with this King Spec SSD for $120 because I knew that SSD pricing would probably be going up as well, and that was a good price for it at the time on that Black Friday deal. And I also got the power supply, which was a Montech Century 2. I went with the 1050 watt version because it was on sale for $99.90, so $100. This, if you haven't heard of it, if you look at the SPL PSU tier list, it's very highly rated. 80 plus gold, 10-year warranty, cybernetics platinum, good stuff here, fully modular. So I went with this, and for $100, getting that kind of power supply should support stuff in a long time into the future. Now, the one part that I somewhat regret was there was a sale on the Montech X5 case, and there was something that I missed about this that I'm not a huge fan of. So, and it's the fans. So right here, these fans, I missed the fact that they're not PWM. In other words, they're always running at the same speed. They are not adjustable. Now, this is something that can be changed. So, in other words, you could get new fans that are PWM, install those, and then the problem is solved, but that costs additional money. Now, the good news is they're not incredibly loud. So, I mean, if you were going to have your PC on your desk next to your monitor right there, you'd probably be annoyed by it. If you're gaming with headphones, which is what I tend to do, or if the PC is like, down on the ground a little bit ways away from you, which is also what I tend to do, it's not super obnoxious. It's not a super loud, high-pitched noise, but I know I would have preferred adjustable speed fans, and that's my one regret with the build. Now, what did I do for the other parts? You can see here the CPU cooler is an Arctic Liquid Freezer 3. This is a pretty good choice as far as you're getting a fairly quiet, again, now I got the noisy system fans, but this is fairly quiet. It keeps it very cool. I have no issues with this. It has a 360 millimeter radiator on it. Does all that I need it. I've used Arctic coolers in the past. I've liked their customer service. I will mention I did receive this one as a review sample. This was not, I'm not being paid money to advertise this in this video or anything like that, but I should disclose any part that I did receive here as a review sample rather than paying for it myself, just so we're clear. And I also will mention that if you're on a budget, you can get a less expensive cooler. You can absolutely go with like a $30 air cooler and it can keep most CPUs completely cool just fine. Now, what CPU am I going with? Now, this is something that I bought a long time ago. I think it still makes sense in high-end systems, but this is a 7800X3D, which I bought when it was the fastest gaming CPU to use in my benchmarking system. But then the 9800X3D came out. So then I bought that and upgraded my benchmarking system. So I will say that you don't absolutely need to get a 7800X3D. However, it still also kind of makes some sense in that the 9800X3D is not a lot faster. And the 7800X3D costs a lot less money. So right now, if I was going to buy one on PC Part Picker, it's $386. Okay, that's a lot of money on a CPU, but again, I'm building a fairly high-end system here. So you could absolutely buy a less expensive CPU, but the 9800X3D is $460. So $460 versus $386, we're saving some money, and you'll only notice the performance difference when you're CPU limited, and you are very, very rarely going to be CPU limited on a 7800X3D. So it's kind of like, it's not exactly a value choice, but it's like going for a super high-end CPU, but also caring a little bit about the value. So that's what I went with here. Now, you could absolutely go with like a Ryzen 7500F or something like that and save a lot of money on the CPU in this build. So if I put the parts that I built this PC with into PC Part Picker, this comes out as a very expensive system. It's like $2,000. But remember, I got some specifically good deals here. Specifically, I got the RAM for $0. So wait a second. How do I change that? So the RAM I got in as $0 as a bundled deal, and I took advantage of the motherboard also being on sale with that bundled deal. So what was that? $159, something like that. That I got on that Black Friday deal. So that saves some money off of that. Also, when I bought it, the storage was $120. So that was a good Black Friday deal I also took advantage of right there. And the power supply when I bought it was also at $99.90. So when I bought things, this was a little bit less crazy if you put it all together. It's a little over $1,600. And it's a very good build. That being said, again, technically I got the CPU cooler for free because I'm a spoiled YouTuber. So as far as the actual cost to me, it's that. And I also got the graphics card for free because I'm a spoiled YouTuber. So for me, the overall price on this is not so bad. Now, I did buy the CPU myself, and I did buy the motherboard, I did buy the SSD, I bought the case, I bought the power supply. Now, also, I'm going to be giving this away to a friend of mine who I've been trying to convert into PC gaming, and now is a bad time to try to convince him to build his own system. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that I am a spoiled YouTuber with lots of PC parts, and I did spend some money on this myself as well. And that's what we're doing here. Now, also, I got, to be clear, this was something I got for a sponsorship deal. I got a solid 1440p monitor from KTC, and I was sponsored this in a different video. To be clear, this video I'm filming right now is not actually sponsored. I'm going to use this monitor, though, for my friend when I give him this system. So I think this system pairs really well with the 1440p display. This one goes 200 hertz. And has, variable refresh rate, etc. It's solid. I've been testing it out. Again, when I accept sponsorship deals, I do try to make sure things are actually decent quality, etc. So I'm pairing it with that monitor for him. And I'm pretty excited about this to try to get my friend converted off of console gaming into the PC gaming space. And yeah, asking him to buy in right now when RAM prices went insane wasn't great. So like I said, I did put some money into this, but again, the 7800X3D, while I did buy it myself, I already owned it for this build. So really all in, I'm in about 400 bucks, 440 bucks on the build myself. So I'm not quite as generous as you might think, but anyway, so that is that. Now, how does this thing actually perform? Quite well. Again, you're really getting the 7800X3D is fast enough that the 9070XT is pretty much never bottlenecked by the CPU in realistic gaming situations. The 7800X3D is super fast. The cooler has been absolutely keeping it cool. I've been happy with the motherboard, and the Wi-Fi works well. My friend doesn't have like Ethernet. He hates cords, so having an Ethernet cord running across his living room was not what he was looking for. So the Wi-Fi is working well on that. And like I said, I've been playing some games on the 16 gigabytes of RAM with everything else closed, and I can't identify any issues. So that again backs up the hardware on box testing here, where again, if you have enough VRAM, which this system does, the 16 gigabytes seems to run pretty much fine. And like I said, when I had everything closed in the background, which they weren't doing in this video because people want to know how it runs with other things in the background, I haven't been running into any sorts of problems on that. Now, the one thing I'll say that actually kind of was a bit interesting on the builds, I was like, okay, what am I going to do for the operating system? Now, some people have issues with, gray market CD keys, etc. So what I ended up doing is, so I have some mini PCs. This is like a little Minis Forum Elite Mini UM780 XTX. And I was like, you know what? That has an SSD in it, and I've got more mini PCs than I actually use, and that SSD has a Windows install on it. So I tried it out, and just popping that SSD in there did get me the Windows install, and then I could just reinstall Windows and make sure I got all the drivers and everything installed correctly for the new system. Now, I think sometimes when you change the parts too much, you can run into issues, but this seemed to work out just fine for that. But if I want to get this mini PC up and running again, I'll need to I'll need to get another SSD in there. So that adds an additional terabyte of storage, as well as got me the Windows install and all of that. So anyway, this is my Rampocalypse PC. I have been pretty happy with the 16 gigabytes of system memory. Yeah, you're not going to want to do heavy multitasking while gaming, and I know that doesn't fit how a lot of people use their PC. But it did work well for I'm just going to be gaming and close everything else down while I'm doing it. And like I said, got it as a bundled deal with that Black Friday deal and could not be happier about that. So seriously, 160 bucks for the motherboard plus the system memory in this economy. All right, I think I've been rambling on at you guys enough. That's my take on a Rampocalypse, but still high-end PC. You could definitely cut down the CPU quite a bit. You can also cut down the GPU, but I was trying to go for a high-end build here. Like I said, biggest regret is the case fans on this case, and that'll be something that I think we'll probably want to change out if my friend gets annoyed by the noise. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and have an excellent day.